Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HCD's office hours for ESG. My name is Anthony Zepeda, and I will be your moderator for today's office hour session. We're going to hold for about a minute or two for more of our colleagues to join us. In the meantime, as always, we invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and the region you represent, and we will begin in about a minute and a half. If you're just signing on, we're waiting for about another minute to get some more folks online. In the meantime, please introduce yourself to the chat with your name and the region you represent. It's always so nice to see so many familiar names in the chat. Hope everyone's having a great day, great Wednesday. Now summer's starting to heat up. Okay, it's 10:02, so I think we're ready to get started. Again, welcome to this week's office hours for ESG. My name is Anthony Zepeda, and I am today's moderator. If you like, you can go to the chat and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent. And a couple of reminders before we get started. This office hours session is being recorded for public record. And also, HCD policy does not allow AI note takers. I know I love them as well, but we can't use them. And if you are using an AI note taker today, please disable that. And otherwise, we have to remove you from the meeting until it is disabled. So next slide, please. Here's to ask a question. All your questions must be submitted in the question box. It's the little Q&A button down below on the ribbon that is going across on your screen. Please type your organization and question into the question box, and the team will read your question out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers throughout the presentation, either in the Q&A box or out loud, depending on how much time we have. Alongside our presenters today, we also have several HCD staff members, including contract representatives, specialists, and management who can help answer questions during the Q&A session. So please put them in the Q&A box. Don't put them in the chat. They tend to get lost. And we have a hard time tracking them. Next slide, please. Please note that both the slides and the recording will be sent to all participants within approximately 2 weeks of today's session. And just 1 second, Gio, I will be right back. Okay, we are back. Next slide, please. Someone always comes to the door when we're right in the middle of a meeting, right? Okay, and now on to the updates. The ESG annual performance reporting for the 22-23 ESG contracts. You all should have received an email a few weeks ago regarding this annual task that we take part in. Workbook 1, which was due on the 16th, is a simple exercise that identifies the projects that you'll be reporting on and the contact information for who we will reach out to for the subsequent workbooks. For those of you who submitted your workbook 1s, the contact person will be receiving an email with further instructions on how to complete workbook 2 and part 2 of workbook 1. Those workbooks are due July 15th, approximately about 1 month from now. If you have any questions on the process, please contact your grant representative or reach out to the NOFA inbox. if you haven't sent those in yet, I think we have 4 or 5 folks that are still have not submitted those. Please contact us as soon as possible to let us know when you will be submitting those. We need to get those taken care of. And we want to make sure you have plenty of time to complete your workbook 2 and part 2 of workbook 1. Next slide, please. Okay, that's for the 22-23 contracts. Now we're moving to updates on the 2023 contracts, which are the active contracts right now. And the expenditure deadline, we've been talking about this for months and it just goes by so quickly. It is just 2 months away, August 17th. Another contract milestone, 80% of the contract must be expended by yesterday. So I know that might be a surprise to some of you. If that is the case, if you're having challenges spending the money, if you haven't reached your 80% of your contract amount by the state, please reach out to your grant representative, or you will be hearing from us as well. So maybe be proactive and reach out to your grant representative, and we can get to work on helping you spend that money in time by the expenditure deadline. If it's already spent, some of you have completed your grant, please reach out to your grant representative for a certificate of completion and further instruction. Next slide, please. And here is our standard slide for the 2024 ESG NOFA and contract. Standard agreements are being developed right now. We are still reviewing a few funding applications, but the majority of you, we will be reaching out with information on your award and what are the next steps. We anticipate having all of the awards announced by July 2025. And for those of you who want to get a head start on the standard agreement process, please go to our website and have your project managers or county council or executive officers review the contract exhibits for the 2024 contracts. As there have been updates, there are performance milestones that we have not included in previous contracts. And the new language also reflects changes to federal regulations and the Uniform Administrative Guidance, which we will touch on in an upcoming slide. Next slide, please. As always, reach out to your team representative, Sam, Gio, myself, or the NOFA inbox if you have any questions or you need assistance. We're here to help, and we're happy to help. So just reach out to us, get in touch with us, and we can help you with your ESG-related activities. Next slide, please. All right, so those are the updates. We had the updates on the APR process for 22 and 23 contracts. We had an update on expenditure deadlines for your current 2023 contracts. And we had updates on the process and how it's going for the 2024 contracts. Do we have any questions so far? Let's see, I'll check the Q&A box here.
Sorry, Anthony. Yeah, we have one question, which I may need Chelsea to help answer with this one. It says, will HUD's removal of gender in its HMIS data elements affect reporting to HCD? Chelsea, do you know the answer to that?
We're not sure at this time, so we can definitely let you know when we hear more about that. But we don't have any direction at this time.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like that was it for our questions. And yes, for our grantees, we're oftentimes in the same boat as you. We're getting the information at the same time as you. So we are looking into that, and we will let you know in subsequent office hours how that will affect reporting. Next slide, please. Okay, we're beginning a new Spotlight series today. If you recall, we just finished a Spotlight series that each office hours we went over a specific ESG component, providing an overview, eligibility, and so on. And for this next series, it's going to be focused around grant management. And for this particular Spotlight series, we're going to focus on requests for funds. We're going to do a brief overview and have a Q&A. And This presentation, it's meant to be kind of a combination style presentation. Our intent is to go over the ESG federal and state requirements in more of a standard presentation. You know, this is what's required, this is why, this is what you have to do. But more importantly, for the ESG team, our intent is to make this process both easier and smoother for our grantees. Submitting RFFs for approval that meet all of the federal, state, HUD, and HCD requirements is arguably the most difficult aspect of managing this grant. And our grantees generally have a lot of questions and need a lot of guidance. So we really want to focus on RFFs as we move forward, especially with the 2024 contracts, to make this less of an onerous exercise and more of an easier, smoother approval process, review and approval process, and also to get you paid more quickly. We want to get those dollars out there so you can deploy them in your communities and keep your operation running for a lot of you smaller folks. So having said that, we're going to jump right into the regulation and policies with the next slide. So as I stated, kind of a combination, academic type of presentation, but also a hands-on, in the weeds daily type of presentation. So we'll start with more of the regulatory framework. The ESG program is about 30 years old and is governed by multiple regulations, policies, and amendments and requirements that have occurred over the past 30 years. So how is that important in terms of reviewing and submitting RFFs? Well, this diagram represents the rubric, kind of the framework that HCD is required to work under when reviewing any financial documents, not only RFFs, but whether that's funding applications, standard agreements, contract amendments, and especially RFFs. This diagram, well, we showed it about a year ago, but I wanted to bring it back out because it's an oldie but goodie. You can see there's the federal cost principles. Then there are the local policies, which would be HCD. There's HUD guidance. And then there's the ESG, what is known as the interim rule. That was just the authorizing legislation, an update to the authorizing resolution for ESG that was made in, I believe, 2012. They had to update it. And that is what we operate under now. So within all of this framework, it can be challenging sometimes for the grantees because, you know, we know you have a lot of irons in the fire. We know that everyone is juggling a lot of projects, but ESG really is governed within this framework. And we really want to get this out there because this is how we operate. This is where all of the requirements come from that we talk about in terms of the RFFs and supporting documentations. So next slide, please. Looking a little closer at these regulations. So we start at the top with the federal cost principles. Also known as 2 CFR 200 or Uniform Administrative Guidance. This guidance, 2 CFR 200, and the principles contained within, they're applicable to all federal grants, not just the ESG. So any type of federal funding and any type of federal contract, you are subject to the regulations outlined in 2 CFR 200. Most of the time, it's accountants and auditors or folks who do monitoring who are most versed in this, but it's good for project managers also to have a general understanding of this framework because you're the one who's usually submitting the RFFs. So there's a lot in there, but for the purposes of this particular office hours, we're just going to highlight a few areas. And here we're highlighting 2 CFR 200.302. which emphasizes the importance of maintaining effective financial management systems to ensure compliance with federal requirements. That's straight from the guidance. And that's just, you know, another way of saying that you have a good accounting system in place and a management system in place to make sure that you're complying with the requirements within 2 CFR 200. It requires grantees to identify the source and the application of their funds, which is really just comes down to the who, what, when, where, why. You know, that's kind of a theme to keep it, a practical idea to keep in mind when you're doing your RFFs, when you're compiling your records and your documentation. what you spent the money on, how you spent the money, why you spent it, when you spent it. This is just general stuff that you should have in terms of accounting systems, and also on your RFFs. That's what we're going to look at. That's exactly what we look at. How did you spend the money? Was it an eligible expense? When was it during the proper reporting period? Why? Street outreach, for example. Coats in the winter. We purchased coats. And what was your documentation? Receipts from a local store for the eligible expense. So just a real general overview at the 10,000 foot level, the federal level. The next slide goes down to ESG regulations, also known as the interim rule, which you will find on the HUD website and also on the ESG website, as well as references on our own website. This area also, it has quite a bit on the financial and record keeping requirements. I know it's not always fun, but you should have someone on your team who is familiar with these, and you can always reach out to our team, who is generally very familiar with these regulations. For the purpose of this presentation, once again, we're not going to do the whole thing. I just want to bring in a general 576.500U. 576.500 is all financial and documentation and regulations, but you really summarize the ESG requirements for financial record keeping. And you are required to retain supporting documentation for all costs charged to the ESG grant. It's a federal and a local requirement. Documentation that demonstrates costs are eligible, allowable, reasonable, and allocable. You'll see that a lot in the ESG regulations. That's really what HUD is looking at when they're doing their auditing of HCD and when they're doing their auditing of grantees. Next slide, please. So going back to that diagram, we have the federal, and then we have the ESG and HUD. And now we're looking at more specific guidance from HUD and then right down to the state level with HCD policies. Once again, too much to go over in just one office hours, but a general summary is this is going to be the eligible uses per ESG component. Another example is written policies and procedures are required for ESG component. You also have to meet the requirements of the standard agreement with HCD. For example, something we just covered, the expenditure deadlines. Your standard agreement is going to have a lot of requirements that are based on the federal guidance and the HUD framework as well. So next slide, please. So those are just highlights. It's as I mentioned, it's the framework which we operate in. And I didn't say all that stuff to bore you, because I know when we talk about federal requirements and financially it can glaze over, but because this is what we operate under. All the requirements that we have in your standard agreement and in the policy documents that we provide, and then in the back and forth interaction you have with your grant representative, say perhaps your RFF was rejected and you were missing this. The reason, all of that is the reason is found there in that framework, that guidance. We have to operate under the federal cost principles and then the HCD and HUD guidance, and then also the ESG interim rules. So trust me, we know it can be difficult. So that's why we're here. We want to help out, and that's why we have so many resources on our website as well. So we're going to go from that more academic high level to a general overview of requests for funding, RFFs, and highlighting the money there. We want to pay you, and it's very important for you to be paid as well. And so let's go to the next slide, Gio. So now we kind of switch gears. We go from that academic to more of the hands-on. I know for everyone, this is probably a very familiar document here, but I wanted to highlight one just to go over it as a review. You can think of this as just sitting down with your grant rep, going over these at the start of the year or mid-year, just to make sure you have everything in place, because oftentimes we reject RFFs, not necessarily because of a humongous error or just a complete failure of an RFF. We generally don't get that. We have competent grantees, and most of them have been doing it for a long time. Even the new folks pick it up pretty quickly. Well, oftentimes we send them back because it's little things, and we can oftentimes think, let the little thing go, but we can't we're audited just like you. HUD looks at our records just like we look at your records. And they do that every year. And so back to the screen, we have an emergency solutions grant program request for funds form. This comes in Excel. You fill it out in Excel, and then you print it to PDF, and you have it signed and submit it. Just the basics here. I don't have the mouse control, but I'll be working from top left down, then over to top right. And it's very basic, the draw request number, the contract number, your reporting period, that oftentimes is missed. And we have to send it back to get the correct reporting period. And then your grantee information. And then moving over to the right, top right, HCD representative, another one. Some folks aren't aware of who their rep is, so they put the wrong rep there. We have to get that corrected as well if it's not the correct representative. The expiration date for the contract, and then the contact person. Who are we going to be sending this information? If we have questions, who do we contact? And their contact information in terms of title, email, and phone number. So those are the basics. Make sure you got those covered. And we go down to the expenditures breakdown. Pretty straightforward. I have an example on here. This is the example from our website. We have one that you can click on our website, and we have it for emergency shelter. We show the approved budget on the left for the emergency shelter of $500,000, and the indirect cost is an example on here. Previously drawn amount, that will be updated as well. So you know how much you have spent and how much you have requested. Request this period right there in the middle. The draw amount of this RFF, 101, is a total at the bottom, with 100,000 requested, and direct costs for emergency shelter, and 1,000 in indirect cost. Once again, this is just an example. And moving over to the year-to-date breakdown, you see your total drawn, percent drawn, and the budget remaining. And let's go to the next slide. That's really the top half. I couldn't fit them all in without really squishing it down. So that's really part one of the request for funds form. And next slide, please. And then we go down to the certification. This is often missed. This was added this year, so folks have been doing it for a while, sometimes miss this. All of these need to be checked. All these boxes need to be checked. And there are certifications that you can read. I won't read them verbatim, but these are the general certifications. If an environmental review is required, has it been completed? Usually not applicable, but in this case, I checked yes. With this request for funds, or any funds used to acquire equipment valued in excess of $5,000, not applicable, or no. And so this is another section. Like I said, this is getting down a real basic level, just going over a basic RFF form. In the name of the authorized person, you have your authorized representative name and their title. And then in the signature, I just put my own signature here, but this is where you print out the document in PDF and have the authorized representative sign this, and then the date of the RFF. This is what we, as a staff, will review first. We will look at this document first. We will then compare it to the DIR and also your budget as it appears in your standard agreement and your previous draws and other subsequent related information. Next slide, please. So now we move into the detailed expense report, or often called the DIR. And once again, keeping with our theme of an emergency shelter component and for the RFF. And I just did a little screenshot here. I didn't include the whole thing, but it was mainly just for illustrative purposes. So you can see moving from left to right, top where it says draw number, the draw number must match the RFF form. The contract number must be accurate, and the reporting period must match the RFF. And moving down to the first row, we have the budget component, this emergency shelter, and moving to the right, the activity. For this particular example, we have non-staff cost, shelter operations, and vendor. For this example, I just put the name, shelter name. It's going to be the name of the shelter that they are operating their emergency shelter at. And then the period, their billing period, this needs to be consistent with the reporting period. It also needs to be consistent with your supporting documentation. The line item identifies the expense, and for this example, I just put shelter food, Walmart, local food company, Little Caesars. And then to the right, more of the financial information from your finance team, the check number, journal entry, the check date, journal entry, the total, and then how much you are requesting. The DERs, oftentimes the biggest challenge we have here are incorrectly, expenses classified incorrectly. And we ask that you, if you have any questions when you're doing this, if you're unsure, be more proactive and reach out to us in advance. It saves us all a lot of time because then we don't have to shoot it back to you and go through the process again. And we really want to make sure that your team isn't spending a lot of time on submitting RFS. We want you to be out there serving the community and serving the mission that you were created for, and also spending the funds. We love to see you spending the funds. Next slide, please. So a couple best practices for your RFS and DER. The correct reporting period, we touched on that. Make sure you're in the correct reporting period. Make sure your HCD representative name is correct. Activities, make sure that it's an eligible activities. The detailed line item description, while we are pretty good at knowing the program, we're not all experts on all things. So a detailed line item description really helps when we're reviewing. And then, as always, reach out to your representative or the NOFA inbox if you need assistance. We are here to help. You don't have to submit them in the dark and say, I hope this is good, because we will help you all the way through the process. And before I move into the next section, I want to pause and ask the team, was there anything that you wanted to jump in on in terms of the ESG team that I may have missed in that brief overview?
I would just add, to be more specific, when you're saying the reporting period, that means that the time that you spent the money in needs to match that too. So when you've written the check might be different, but when you incurred the debt needs to be within that reporting period. And so that's in the dates on the DER is something that we're also going to look at, is to make sure that those dates in the DER match the reporting period.
Thank you, Tuesday. Yeah, that's very helpful. And Tuesday, the stickler for these, she's the one who does oftentimes the final review. So she's going to catch anything, and she's always a great source for information. If you have access to Tuesday, you should ask her questions. I do all the time. Next slide, please. All right, now we are to everyone's favorite subject, backup documentation requirements. And on the left, the picture of all those folders and files, that's kind of like what we went through at the first of this presentation, all of the regulatory framework that we operate under. And to the right, that's how most of our grantees feel when I tell them about their backup documentation requirements. But as mentioned, we're here to help, and we're not going to leave you hanging. We can help you with these, and we'll all learn together as we go through this. But just to kind of summarize, the ESG regulations, going back to that 576-500U, that you need to retain supporting documentation for all costs charged to the ESG grant. And the documentation must prove that the costs were eligible as well. And just a little side note, for those of you who might not be aware of this, in your standard agreement, this is a federal requirement and an ESG requirement and an HCD requirement. You're required to retain these documents for 5 years. And so oftentimes you think, well, we did that grant last year. We closed it. It was great. We were very successful in it. Yes, but still, auditing usually takes place, or monitoring usually takes place at least 1 year after, sometimes up to 3 or 4 years later. And so when an auditor comes in, or a HCD, or Office of Inspector General, or HUD, they're going to be asking you, what did you spend that on? Where did you spend it? When did you spend it? And if you have that nice file with all the documentation, you can just hand it to them and not rely on your memory and scramble to try and get the document. So that is a requirement. And the 2 CFR 200, you must record the identity, the source. I'm trying to think of a better way to put this. You must show where the money came from. So for example, it came from HUD, which put it through HCD, which then awarded it to us. It's a federal grant that goes through the state. And the application of funds, what did you spend it on? And it's all this regulatory framework. It's not intended to be any more onerous than any other financial record keeping. The objectives of these federal cost pools is to show what you did, why you did it, and how you did it, when you did it, and then hold on to that documentation. If you can kind of keep that in mind, it oftentimes makes the process easier, because all you're really doing is just, you got a piece of paper here that says how we spent it, why we spent it, when we spent it, and where we spent it. It's pretty basic. And your documentation, it should tell a story. An auditor or a monitor or even HCD staff, we should be able to pick up the file that you sent to us, and a reasonable person should be able to review the expense, the eligibility, and supporting documentation, and immediately understand what you did with the money, how you spent it, where you spent it, and then just check that box and issue a request for payment for your RFF. So having said all that, let's dive into the backup documentation requirements. Next slide, please. This is one of our favorite slides for office hours. I think I've shown this in every presentation since this year started. And the next two slides are like this. It's just a quick overview of the funding requirements for RFFs for the 2023 contracts, and then moving forward in the 2024 contracts. For your first RFF that you submit for any ESG component, except I believe, no, ESG component, is going to be full backup documentation for all items identified on the detailed expense report. So for every line item that you submit in your request for reimbursement, we need backup documentation for that. Rapid rehousing, also known as RRH, and homelessness prevention, and known as HP, you must have approved policies and procedures. And there's also another level of backup documentation, which we'll go over soon with those two programs. To the best of your ability, please redact all personally identifying information. But this is a fine line as well. Work with your subs and with your finance department. We do have a secure system within eCivis for reviewing these that meets all the federal requirements. So it's not necessary to submit a completely blacked out, intake form or rental lease. You can just take out the name, the social security number, and use an HMIS number. That's what we recommend. And that way it's much easier for us to correlate the supporting documentation, say a rental agreement on one hand, with an HMIS number over here. We can then go, okay, so they paid this person for this rental agreement on this date, and we just covered all the basics: who, what, when, where, why. Next slide, please. So that was the first RFF. And repeating this for you until you guys have it memorized as well as I do. For the second and subsequent RFFs, supporting documentation is only required for 2 line items per component. The grantee selects the line items to document. There is a little caveat there that we may request additional documentation if it's applicable, but in general, you only have to support documentation for 2 line items per component that you, the grantee, choose. We ask that you would highlight those 2 line items, as sometimes we receive RFFs, second and third RFFs that have a lot of supporting documentation, but it wasn't highlighted which line item it was from. And we have, as staff, have to go through each line item and try and figure out, does this match this 50-page supporting documentation? And it can really slow down the process. And as mentioned, we want to get the money out there. We want to get you paid. So make it easier for us to pay you as you're pieced together. And let's see, next slide, please. It's the same thing about the rapid rehousing and the personally identifying information, or PII. So in terms of rapid rehousing or any kind of rental assistance that you apply, I'm trying to think of a way to say this, because there are certain exceptions for deposits, but we won't go over that now unless it comes up in a question. But if you're providing rental assistance, you're going to need a complete client file. You're going to need all of these federally required and HUD required and HCD required documents. You're going to need a rental and lease agreement signed and dated. You're going to need copies of rental payments and invoices. There's the Violence Against Women Act addendum, also known as VAWA. There's the lead-based paint notice, which I believe is federal and state. There's also, this is a big one, all rental lease agreements that works in conjunction. You're going to need to complete a federally required rent reasonableness certification, and also a fair market rent certification, or FMR as it's known. These are HUD requirements, and HCD has to abide by these requirements, and we require our subgrantees to abide by them, and your subgrantees must abide by them as well. This is all required with every RFF submitted for rental assistance, especially rapid rehousing. Tuesday, you want to jump in?
I do want to add that this stuff is in addition to providing documentation that shows eligibility for the clients. So for rapid rehousing, it would be the homelessness certification, and for homelessness prevention, it would be the certification for that. So so this is in addition to the things that we need for just showing that the client themselves are eligible. And this is specific to rental assistance and for financial assistance.
Very good point. Thank you, Tuesday. Next slide, please. Some more general examples. This isn't inclusive by any means, just some general examples for this discussion. For RFF supporting documentation, for street outreach, it could be receipts for small purchases. As I mentioned earlier, coats in the winter. Could be for staff costs, it could be timesheets, payroll documents, and pay stubs. Emergency shelter, similar. You have supplies, receipts from where, when, how, and why you spent the money. For staff time, timesheets, payroll documents, pay stubs. For shelter operations, insurance, could be the invoice and the payment. Next slide, please. And just so you know, we don't expect you to memorize all this like we have to, but we also rely on documents, on a lot of guiding documents, a lot of resources on our webpage. For example, going back to rapid rehousing and rental assistance, we have client file checklists. I usually send these out to all of my grantees, and we try and make sure that everyone's aware of these. These are the literal documents that identify everything that must be in a client file in order to meet the supporting documentation requirements as outlined in the federal guidance, in the HUD guidance, and in the HCD policy documents. For the purpose of today's presentation, I, of course, put up the most difficult one because this is the one we send back the most. And generally, it's what our grantees, the majority of our grantees have, is rapid rehousing dollars. It's broken up over, let's see, 1, 2, 3 slides because it's a pretty big form. And I didn't include, it's not inclusive. I didn't put everything on there, but I did want to highlight some areas. And Tuesday just touched on this. In addition to the supporting documentation, which is going to be on the subsequent slides, there's beginning with eligibility. What category of homelessness? How did you certify and verify that they are homeless? And there are boxes to check there. There are steps to take there. And whatever is applicable to your agency for that particular client and that particular client file, you will fill out this form. Next slide, please. And another note on these forms is they have all of the references that I'm talking about in terms of if you're curious about something, you can click on the link. You know, HUD lead-based paint trainings, California lead-based paint assessment worksheet, requirements for rental assistance agreements, and then one of the ESG authorizing legislation citations down below that requires documentation of payments made to owners for rental assistance, and the requirements for supporting documentation, including the dates. So this is moving down the rapid rehousing checklist. If you ever have any questions, if you're ever unsure what to submit in terms of your RFF, go to this form. It has all of the requirements, and these are all the things that we're going to look at as we're going through. Tuesday, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I appreciate that you said that these have great hyperlinks to the regulations and such as that, but it also has links to worksheets and a few templates that you can utilize for your program. And I really recommend, even if you don't use this checklist for all of your clients, what you should be doing is at least looking at it to see it touches base on the most important topics that we're going to be looking at when we're really reviewing and monitoring your request for funds. So it's a great document. You do not have to fill it out for every client, but I highly recommend at least being knowledgeable of it and looking at all these different hyperlinks to see if any of those are useful to you.
Thank you, Tuesday. It's a good tag team here. And so as you can see, residential lease agreement is required for rapid rehousing. And those, you can check the box on all these. Was it signed by the landlord and the participant? Oftentimes we run into that it's not. Was it dated? Does it address late payment requirements? Is it tenant-based rental assistance or project-based rental assistance? And then next box, payments made on behalf. Proof of rental assistance payments made to owners. The dates of occupancy. Once again, there's a recurring theme throughout this presentation. Who, what, when, where, why. You know, if you can keep those in mind, it's tell that story. And if you cover those bases, in general, your RFFs are going to be tight and they'll go through very quickly, and there will not be a delay in terms of us sending them back and then you sending them back and forth. Next slide, please. And so this is the last page of the checklist that I wanted to go over. You can see full of links, all kinds of links on the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act documentation that is required, the fair market rent, FMR, and rent reasonableness. We often call it RR, so we don't trip on it like I just did. And did you complete it? Complete it, boom, check the box. And of course, did you include it in your documentation? Got to include all these. You can't just check the box and submit the checklist. All these are to guide you as you put together your client file or supporting documentation. Next slide, please. All right, so I thought this graphic here was rather appropriate. Sometimes it can feel like this in terms of having all of the documentation that is required. But we do have some tips for you, and we are here to help you with these. So next slide, please. So some of the best practices, there are a lot of them, but these are kind of the highlights. Your client files are identified by HMIS number. If you have an HMIS number stamped or written on all of the supporting documentations that apply to that client file, that is going to save a lot of detective work on our end. You know, it's very similar to when, you know, for your larger agencies who use subs, when your sub is submitting stuff to you to review before you submit it to us, you need to make sure it's tight. You need to know exactly where the expense is, who it's related to, because you know we're going to ask about that. So it's the same thing. HUD is going to ask us about that. We ask our grantees about it. Our grantees ask our sub-grantees about it. So the HMIS number, that's one of the best ways to do it. And it makes redacting the other name and the client's name and their social security number, it makes it easy. And we can just go by a client file that is identified by an HMIS number. We would recommend, this is something new. We haven't really brought it up before, but headers or title pages for multiple files. I'll show an example here in another slide if that doesn't make sense, but digging through 50 to 300 page supporting documentations for a single line item, it can take some time. So if there are headers and title pages where we know exactly where to go to as we're looking through your documentation, that is fantastic. We have several of our grantees do that, and it makes the process smoother and faster. And it goes back to that, what I was saying. We want to pay you. So if I'm wanting to be paid by someone, I want to make it as easy as possible for them to pay me. I don't want them to have to do any extra work. I just want to submit it and say, pay me. Next tip, highlight the DIR line items that correspond to the supporting documentation for your second and subsequent RFS. So we don't have to do the guesswork. There's no guesswork. If you've got 50, 60 line items. We don't have to go through everyone trying to figure out which one is this, which one is. Just highlight it in yellow or a check mark or something. Any way that your grant representative can look at that and know, okay, here's the line item. There's supporting documentation. Check, 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 check. Good. And make it simple to review. You know, it's kind of like the theme. Tell the story. Who, what, when, where, why. How did we spend it? What did we spend it on? When did we spend it? Makes it very simple. It's very straightforward. Sometimes with all these regulations, it can make these RFFs too complex. When really it's just, we want to pay you, you want to get paid, and we want you out there in the community serving the homeless and achieving your mission. Next slide, please. So what I was talking about, the headers or separators, these are just a couple of examples. I'll call them out by name. Orange County always submits great RFF supporting documentation. And oftentimes they have these headers separated for their administration portion of their DIR. They have this title page, and then you just turn that title page and there's all the documentation. Same thing. Next slide, please. Another example, this one of the most recent RFFs, emergency shelter backup documentation. Next slide, please. And rapid rehousing backup documentation. You know, it isn't anything fancy. It's just something that helps to tell that story. Here's how we spent the money. Here's our supporting documentation. It's under rapid rehousing. Boom. We just go straight to that page, take a look at the line items. They're highlighted. Makes the process a lot faster. You get these RFFs in and out quickly. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, we have a ton of resources on the ESG webpage for RFFs and DIRs. This is just a quick sample that we wanted to include. You'll have these on the slides when we send them out, so you can always click on them. But there is a RFF and a sample request for funds template on our website that you can take a look at, or you can download and play with, get comfortable with the RFF process, make your own template so it makes the process go by faster. What I mean by that is you enter all the information in and just boom, or have it autofill as you do your RFFs. We have the DIR report also. You can do the same thing. And then we also have an ESG eligible expense guide that is broken down by component. You can go through there if you have questions on whether it is an eligible expense. And then just a couple examples of the client file checklist. We just went through the rapid rehousing client file checklist. That's available on our webpage. And I also have one here for emergency shelter, which we showed in the RFF example and DIR example earlier. But we have those for each component, and they're available on our website. You can download those and keep those handy in your RFF files to make sure that each RFF you're covering all the bases and really increasing the likelihood of your RFF moving through the system quickly and you getting paid quickly. Next slide, please. So that's it. Kind of an overview of the RFFs, both the regulatory framework that we operate under, which is really the basis of all these requirements that we have, and also more of a hands-on approach to completing your RFFs and that day-to-day in the weeds type of approach where get it in quickly, tell the story, have your data tell the story, and make it complete. And we will then do our best to make sure you get paid quickly. And then we will all survive the audits and monitoring that will come in future years on these grants. With that, I want to turn it back over to Amanda and see if we have any questions.
There have been a couple of questions. Tuesday has answered them on the side, mostly about backup documentation. So generally speaking, someone asked, when I submit my second RFF and I have 10 lines of rapid rehousing expenses on the DIR, do I need to highlight 2 lines and provide complete client files for those 2 lines, or all 10 lines on the DIR? And Tuesday responded and said, basically you need to submit the 2 lines that were highlighted of backup documentation, not all 10. So it's only the first RFF where the backup documentation is needed for all line items. For the second RFF and on, you only pick 2 line items to provide the backup documentation for. And the next question for the backup documentation for rapid rehousing, if the fees are only, so application fees, are we required to attach leases, etc., for application fees? And the answer is no. You would only need eligibility documentation and documents related to the payment, checks and other payment information is the answer Tuesday gave. So you don't need leases and client files and all of that. So
Just to add, we understand that if you're paying application fees, you haven't gone into a lease up. And we also understand that you might be paying application fees multiple times for the same client or participant. So we need the documentation that you have up to that level, which is going to be their homelessness certification and your different casework documentation.
Thank you, Tuesday and Amanda. And so, to kind of wrap it up, you guys can study those regulatory requirements all you want on your own, and the more academic, policy wonky types like myself. But for those who are just looking for on the ground ways to get your RFF submitted and paid quickly, just keep this in mind. Tell the story. Make it easy for the story to follow. A reasonable person, an auditor, can come here in 3 or 4 years and know exactly, they can pick up that file and know exactly what you spent, where you spent it, how you spent it, when you spent it. And that will make it easy for both auditing and documentation requirements, but it also makes it, more importantly, easier for us to process these and pay you quickly. So keep that in mind and reach out to your rep if you have any questions or the NOFA inbox. Next slide, please. The next few slides are just the standard slides we have at the end of each presentation. We have our ESG resources, which identifies the ESG webpage. You can click there and follow the tabs to whatever section you want to find the information on, whether that's resources, forms, previous trainings, videos, policy documents. We have it all there. There's also the ESG program team contact, the ESG NOFA inbox, which the address is listed on the screen. And that is monitored Monday through Friday during normal business hours. If you can't reach your rep, or if you're not sure who to contact, that's going to be your best bet. Just send it to the NOFA inbox and someone will take a look at it and respond to you. Next slide, please. Can't forget our social media, as HCD continues to upgrade our social media sites. And you can like us on Facebook, follow us on X, or follow us on LinkedIn. We welcome you following us. And the next slide. And this is always the last slide, the pitch, where we ask you to join our team if you're looking for a great place to work. HCD is getting ready to split into 2 separate, well, there's the larger agency that governs this is being split into 2 organizations, and one organization is going to focus on homelessness and housing, and that is what HCD is a part of. And so if you're interested in joining our team and helping us achieve our mission, please follow the links below. We're always looking for good people. And with that, we are wrapping up. The next office hours, we're going to let you know soon, as we are not certain if we're going to have one in 2 weeks, that is the July 2nd. But we will let you know with an email whether it is going to take place or not within the next few days or so. Until then, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
We have one question in the Q&A box. I don't know if it was
last minute.
Yeah.
the question is, thank you, Gio, sorry. Will HCD ever consider moving away from the Excel macro sheets and just plain Excel? The macro sheets are difficult to work with and can't convert to PDF. Humble suggestion. We haven't really considered that because that's what we have here at HCD.
But you never know for 2024. Yeah.
That's all I can say. I'm sorry, Felipe.
Felipe, but we appreciate these suggestions and keep them coming.
We've had issues with those for years, so I'm sorry. All I can say is sorry.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Felipe. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Take care.